I found a photo of my 14-year-old daughter kissing a man who had to be pushing 70. Not in some dark, hidden room. Not in a strange, unfamiliar place. But right here, in my own house. My first instinct wasn't clear. Call the cops? Call an ambulance for the fist squeezing my heart? Trying to crush the life out of me? I didn't know. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. But the worst part, the absolute gut-freezing worst part of it all, was the sickening certainty that this was only the beginning. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 42, a software engineer living in Austin, Texas. Life's generally been kind, or at least manageable. After my divorce 3 years ago, a messy, soul-draining affair, I was granted sole custody of my only daughter, Lily. From that moment, she became the sun around which my world revolved. Everything I did, every decision I made, was filtered through the lens of what was best for her. Lily, she was, and in so many ways still is, the best of me, the best of what her mother and I once had. Always a good kid, a straight-A student without me ever having to push. She was an introspective child, thoughtful and quiet, but with a sharp, intelligent mind and a sense of responsibility that often seemed far beyond her years. When her classmates were obsessed with the latest TikTok trends or fleeting celebrity gossip, Lily would be lost in a book or meticulously sketching in her notepad, her brow furrowed in concentration. She had this quiet dignity about her, a gentle strength. I used to look at her, especially after the divorce tore our little family unit apart, and think, well, I might have failed as a husband, monumentally so, but at least I'm doing this right. At least I'm a good father. I clung to that belief like a drowning man to a raft. It was the one part of my life where I felt I hadn't completely screwed up. The one constant good. I was wrong. So devastatingly. Catastrophically wrong. The foundation I thought I'd built for her, for us, was nothing but sand, and the tide was coming in with a vengeance I couldn't have fathomed in my darkest nightmares. It all started subtly about 6 months ago. Like a shift in the wind you barely notice until the storm is on you. Lily, my home buddy, my quiet girl, began spending more and more time away from the house. Our sacred Friday nights, a tradition we'd upheld since she was old enough to argue about pizza toppings. Dad and Lily's epic movie night, we called it, were gradually replaced. First, it was one Friday a month for a study group, then two. Soon, every Friday was booked. Study group, Dad, she'd say, a little too quickly. Her eyes not quite meeting mine. Big test coming up. Okay, sweetie, I'd reply, trying to sound casual supportive. Need a ride? I can pick you up after. The refusal was always instant, almost reflexive. No, it's fine. Jessica's mom is taking us, or Emily's dad is bringing everyone home. Don't worry about it. But I did worry. A little knot would tighten in my stomach. When I'd ask about the study session later, her answers were vague, evasive. Details were scarce. Sometimes she'd even mix up the names of the friends she was supposedly with. I remember one Saturday morning, I asked how the study group at Jessica's went. Oh, it was good, she said, spooning cereal into her mouth, eyes fixed on the cartoon playing on the TV. Emily had this hilarious story about her cat. I frowned, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. Wait, I thought you were at Jessica's? Or was it Emily's? Lily blinked, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes before it was gone, replaced by a forced brightness. Oh, I meant both. Yeah, we all kind of bounce between houses. You know how it is. She gave a little laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't know how it was, not really, but I let it slide, chalking it up to teenage social complexities I was too old or too male to understand. Still, the unease lingered, a faint, discordant note in the otherwise familiar symphony of our lives. It was the first crack in the illusion of my perfect fatherhood, too small to see clearly, but there nonetheless. I told myself it was just me being overprotective. A single dad worried about his daughter growing up too fast. If only it had been that simple. The low hum of unease escalated to a blaring alarm about a month after the study group incidents started becoming more frequent and her explanations more tangled. I was clearing out my email inbox, deleting spam and flagging work messages when an order confirmation from Amazon caught my eye. It wasn't for me. The items listed were peculiar for our household: an Italian silver chain necklace, a mini bottle of Chanel perfume, and a designer-looking tote bag. The total was close to $400. My credit card. My heart began to thrum a worry beat. Lily wasn't a particularly materialistic kid. She appreciated nice things, sure, but this felt out of character. And she certainly didn't have that kind of money. Nor would she spend it so frivolously without a major discussion. I called her downstairs. Lily, honey, can you look at this for a sec? I tried to keep my voice even, non-accusatory. She came over, peered at my laptop screen. Her eyes darted over the list of items, and I saw her jaw tighten just for a fraction of a second. When she looked up at me, her expression was a carefully constructed mask of nonchalance, but her gaze kept skittering away from mine. Oh, that, she said, a little too airily. That's for Sarah. She ordered some stuff and her mom's weird about packages. So she asked if she could use our address. She already paid me back. No worries, Dad. A blatant lie, and a clumsy one at that. Sarah was one of her closer friends, but the explanation felt hollow, rehearsed. My internal alarms were screaming now. "Okay," I said slowly, watching her. "That's fine." Later that evening, after Lily had retreated to her room claiming a mountain of homework, I logged back into Amazon. My stomach churned. I clicked on the order details, scrolling down. And there it was. The ship-to address was ours, yes. But the payment methods section, the name associated with my credit card for this specific transaction, wasn't mine. It was listed under a profile I'd never created, for a card I'd never authorized for such a profile. The name on the payment profile was Grandpa Leo. Grandpa Leo. A chill snaked down my spine. We didn't know anyone named Leo, let alone anyone Lily would call Grandpa, other than my own father, who had passed away 5 years prior, and her maternal grandfather, John, who lived in Florida and went strictly by Grandpa John. The name meant nothing to me, but it was linked to my credit card buying gifts for my daughter. The implications were terrifying, but still too nebulous, too monstrous to fully grasp. All I knew was that my daughter had lied to my face and a stranger was involved. The ground beneath my feet felt a little less solid. A few days later, the vague sense of dread solidified into cold, hard terror. Our shared family iPad had been acting glitchy, so I decided to reset the network settings and, while I was at it, update the master password. As I navigated through the settings, the Messages app icon in the dock showed a small, almost imperceptible badge. One recently deleted conversation. My fingers, suddenly clumsy, hovered over the icon. It was a shared device, but Lily used it far more than I did, mostly for school research or watching videos. A deleted conversation wasn't necessarily sinister. Kids delete messages all the time. But given the recent unease, the Amazon order, the name Grandpa Leo echoing in my mind, I couldn't ignore it. With a click, I opened Messages. Then, I navigated to the recently deleted folder. My breath hitched. There it was. A single thread, not yet permanently erased. The contact name was just L. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tapped on it. The screen filled with a string of messages that made the blood drain from my face. "Can't wait to see you again, my sweet girl. Face blowing a kiss next Friday feels like an eternity away. Just thinking about your smile. You light up my whole world. Lilybug. Only a few more weeks, and we'll be free, just like we planned. Remember our secret promise. Don't worry about your dad. He's just scared of how mature you've become. He doesn't understand you like I do." My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the iPad. Mature? Free? Secret promise? And then the images. One was a photo of Lily, asleep in her own bed, her face peaceful, vulnerable, taken from an angle that suggested someone was standing right over her. My stomach revolted. Another was a selfie. Lily, smiling a little shyly, next to a man. An older man, his arm draped casually around her shoulder. His face was kind, grandfatherly. If you didn't know the context. White hair, a warm smile, but his eyes. There was something in his eyes that made my skin crawl. They were at a small, unfamiliar cafe, a place I'd never seen, never been to with her. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. This wasn't just a lie about an Amazon order. This wasn't just sneaking out to meet friends. This was something else. Something predatory. Something that threatened to shatter everything I held dear. I don't remember walking upstairs. I only remember standing outside Lily's closed bedroom door, the iPad clutched in my trembling hand like a weapon. I knocked, my voice a strangled rasp. "Lily, can I talk to you for a minute?" She opened the door, a book in her hand, a look of mild annoyance on her face that quickly morphed into something else, fear. When she saw the iPad, saw my expression, I couldn't speak. I just held out the device, my hand shaking, the screen displaying those horrifying messages, that damning selfie. Her face went chalk white. Her eyes, wide and terrified, darted from the screen to my face and back again. For a moment, she looked like a cornered animal. Then the fear was replaced by a sudden, unexpected fury. "You have no right to go through my private messages," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "That's my stuff. You're invading my privacy." Before I could utter a single word, before I could ask who L was, who this man was, what any of it meant, she slammed the door in my face. The click of the lock turning echoed in the sudden, suffocating silence of the hallway. I sank down onto the top step of the stairs, the iPad slipping from my numb fingers and clattering onto the wooden floor. My head was empty, a roaring vacuum where thoughts should have been. There was no anger, not yet. That would come later, a tidal wave of it. Right then, there was only one feeling, vast and overwhelming, a profound, crushing helplessness. My daughter, my world, was caught in something terrible and I had no idea what to do. The helplessness eventually gave way to a cold, simmering rage, and beneath that, a desperate need for answers. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling, replaying those messages, that picture over and over in my mind, I printed out the screenshots of the chat logs and the selfie. Lily refused to come out of her room, a tray of untouched breakfast sitting outside her door. The silence in the house was heavy, suffocating. My first stop was Lily's school. I requested a meeting with Mrs. Davison, the principal, a stern but usually fair woman. I laid the printouts on her polished desk. "Mrs. Davison," I began, my voice hoarse. "I found these on my daughter's iPad. I don't know who this man is." The messages refer to him as L, and Lily is clearly meeting him in secret. She studied the papers, her expression growing increasingly grave. She adjusted her glasses, looked at me, then back at the picture. There was a hesitation in her demeanor that set my teeth on edge. "Mr. Harris," she said finally, her voice low, "this is disturbing. Lily is a good student, always has been. I might know something relevant, but I need to be careful with student confidentiality." Confidentiality? My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. "My daughter is meeting a grown man, secretly. Look at these messages. He's just scared of how mature you've become." "What is that supposed to mean?" Mrs. Davison held up a hand. "Please, Mr. Harris, let me explain what I can." Lily was, for a time, part of a voluntary student mentorship and counseling program we had here. It was run by an external organization called SafeMind. They provide volunteer mentors. My heart sank. Was this man, L, one of them? She nodded slowly. There was a volunteer mentor, his first name was Leo. Leo M. He worked with a few of our students, including Lily, offering guidance, someone to talk to. This was several months ago. And, I pressed, leaning forward. "What happened?" Mrs. Davison sighed, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. M. was let go from the program. SafeMind terminated their association with him about 3 months ago. The reason cited was behavior exceeding established boundaries with a mentee. They weren't specific, Mr. Harris. SafeMind handled it internally. We were just informed he would no longer be volunteering. Exceeding boundaries. The phrase hung in the air like a toxic cloud. 3 months ago. The timing lined up with when Lily started acting distant, secretive. He hadn't stopped. He'd just gone underground. Thanking Mrs. Davison, though I felt anything but thankful, I left the school. A new layer of dread settling over me. Back home, with Lily still barricaded in her room, I did something I'd never done before. I searched her sanctuary. It felt like a betrayal. Another violation of her trust. But the stakes were too high. I had to know more. Her room was tidy, as always, but there was a tension in the air, a reflection of the turmoil she was clearly experiencing. I looked everywhere, desk drawers, under her mattress, in her closet. Finally, tucked away in a dusty shoebox beneath her bed. Amongst old art supplies, I found it. A small, spiral-bound notebook. It wasn't a diary in the traditional sense. The pages were filled with a strange mix of doodles, song lyrics, and what looked like coded entries, dates, times, and cryptic symbols. And then, on one page, written in Lily's familiar neat cursive, a single, horrifyingly clear entry. Meeting L. Cabin. 3 p.m. Don't forget water and snack for him. Cabin? What cabin? My hands began to tremble. Frantically, I flipped through more pages. Another entry. L. Says the cabin is our special place. No one else knows. Our secret world. Then, a crudely drawn map. A series of turns off a main highway, leading to a small square labeled our spot. The highway looked like TX 71 West, heading out of Austin. A cabin. Out of town. More than 40 minutes away if my quick mental calculation of the route was correct. Isolated. Secret. My blood ran cold. This was no innocent mentorship. This was calculated. This was predatory. And my daughter was walking right into it. The notebook fell from my shaking hands. The coded notebook, the mention of a cabin, it all painted a sickening picture. I knew I couldn't confront Lily again, not yet. She'd only retreat further, warned by my previous discovery. I had to see this for myself, to understand the terrifying reality of where my daughter was going and with whom. The following Friday, Lily's usual study group night, I was a wreck of anxiety and adrenaline. She came downstairs around 5 p.m., backpack slung over her shoulder, the picture of teenage normalcy. "Going to Ashley's, Dad?" she said, her voice carefully neutral. "We're working on that history project. Probably gonna crash there, okay?" "Okay, sweetie," I managed, my own voice sounding strained to my ears. "Be safe. Text me when you get there." "Will do." A quick, almost fugitive peck on my cheek, and she was out the door. I waited 5 minutes, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, then grabbed my keys. I'd already rented an inconspicuous sedan earlier that week, a bland gray model that wouldn't stand out. My own SUV was too recognizable. I followed the Uber she'd called at a safe distance. As predicted, it pulled up outside Ashley's house, a familiar brick two-story in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Lily got out, waved at the driver, and walked up the driveway. I parked down the street, hidden by a large oak tree, my breath fogging the windshield in the cooling evening air. For a moment, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was just a normal teenage sleepover. Then, my blood turned to ice. Instead of going to Ashley's front door, Lily veered off, walking along the side of the house, her figure disappearing into the deepening shadows of the backyard. My heart leaped into my throat. What was she doing? I waited, an eternity compressed into a few minutes. Then, I saw her emerge from the back gate of Ashley's property onto a quiet side street. She looked around furtively, then walked quickly towards the end of the block. And there, parked under the dim glow of a streetlight, was a dark gray SUV. The same model, I realized with a jolt. That had been in the background of some pictures Lily had on her social media from months ago, pictures supposedly taken on a school field trip that I now suspected never happened. Lily opened the passenger door and slipped inside. The SUV pulled away from the curb smoothly, its headlights cutting through the twilight. The driver, even from a distance, I recognized the shock of white hair, the set of the shoulders. Leo. My hands clenched, the steering wheel of my rental, knuckles white. A primal rage, cold and terrifying, surged through me. I pulled out, following them, my mind a maelstrom of fear and fury. They drove west on TX-71, just as the crude map in Lily's notebook had suggested. The city lights of Austin receded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the dark, rolling landscape of the Texas Hill Country. After about 40 minutes, the SUV signaled, turning off the highway onto a narrow, unpaved county road. Trees pressed in on either side, their branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. My little rental bumped and rattled over the rough terrain. Finally, they turned again, onto an even more secluded dirt track, barely wide enough for one vehicle. And then I saw it. Nestled in a small clearing, almost swallowed by the encroaching woods, was a rustic, isolated log cabin. No other houses in sight, no lights other than the dim glow coming from the cabin's windows. No cameras, no passers-by, just the two of them swallowed by the immense, indifferent wilderness. Leo's SUV parked beside the cabin. He got out, walked around to Lily's side, and opened her door with a theatrical bow. I saw him say something, saw Lily laugh, a sound I couldn't hear but could vividly imagine. Then he put his arm around her shoulder, proprietorially, and guided her inside. The cabin door closed behind them, leaving me alone in the darkness, the silence of the woods pressing in. I sat there in my car, engine off, completely and utterly poleaxed. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly I could feel the plastic creaking, my nails digging into my palms. When I finally unclenched them, minutes or maybe an hour later, I saw the crescent-shaped indentations, dark red, on the verge of bleeding. The image of that cabin door closing, sealing my daughter inside with that monster, was burned into my retinas. The drive back to Austin was a blur of impotent rage and chilling fear. The cabin, the isolation, the horrifying possibilities of what went on behind that closed door gnawed at me. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. Confronting Leo myself might make things worse, might endanger Lily further. He was clearly a manipulator, and God only knew what else. I needed help. Real help. The moment I got back to my empty house, the silence mocking me, I picked up the phone and called April Ramirez. We'd been friends since our freshman year at UT Austin. Two clueless kids trying to navigate college life. She was a force of nature then, and even more so now. Sharp, tenacious, with a bullshit detector honed by years as an investigative journalist for a major Dallas newspaper. If anyone could help me figure out how to approach this nightmare, it was April. Daniel? What's up? You sound like hell, she answered on the second ring, her voice instantly cutting through my fog of panic. The dam broke. The words tumbled out. Lily, the messages, Grandpa Leo, the school's vague warnings, the cabin, seeing them together. I recounted everything, my voice cracking, tears I hadn't realized I was holding back finally streaming down my face. April listened patiently, interjecting only with quiet, pointed questions. There was no judgment in her voice, only a deepening concern that mirrored my own. When I finished, there was a brief silence on the line. Then, decisively, "Okay, Danny, I'm on the next flight to Austin. Don't do anything. Don't talk to Lily about this again. Don't go near that cabin. Just wait for me. We'll figure this out." Relief, sharp and profound, washed over me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. April arrived the next morning, a whirlwind of focused energy. She brought more than just moral support, she came equipped. A bag filled with compact recording devices, high-resolution cameras with night vision, encrypted communication gear. She transformed my quiet suburban kitchen into a makeshift command center. "First things first," she said, all business, coffee mug in hand. "We need irrefutable evidence of what's happening at that cabin, and who this Leo character really is. We can't just go to the cops with your word and a few screenshots. They'll call it a domestic dispute, a runaway teen, whatever. We need to build a case." Over the next 2 weeks, a period that felt like 2 agonizing years, April and I worked with a quiet, desperate intensity. Using the location from Lily's notebook and my reconnaissance, we managed, under the cover of darkness, to discreetly install several motion-activated, solar-powered cameras around the perimeter of the cabin property, camouflaged among the trees. They fed live, encrypted video to a secure server April set up. We also began tracking Leo's movements as much as possible. Using a GPS tracker, April managed to get a PI contact to covertly place on his SUV when he was parked at a grocery store she'd observed him frequenting. We monitored his schedule, his patterns. The footage from the cabin started coming in, and it was horrifying. It wasn't just Lily. Over those 2 weeks, we saw Leo bring at least 3 other young girls to that cabin. Different days, different times. They all looked to be around the same age, 12, maybe 15 at the oldest. Each arrival was the same, Leo, solicitous and charming, guiding them inside. The cameras couldn't see through the walls, thank God in one sense, but the implication of what was happening within that isolated structure was a suffocating weight. My anger, which had been a cold, simmering dread, ignited into a blazing inferno. This wasn't just about my daughter anymore. This man was a predator, systematically targeting vulnerable children. The helplessness I'd felt was replaced by a furious, protective resolve. We had to stop him. For Lily. For all of them. While the cameras gathered their chilling, silent testimony, April was a demon on her laptop, digging into Leo MS background. The name from the SafeMind program was a starting point, but it felt too generic, too clean. One evening, April let out a low whistle from across my kitchen table where she'd been buried in public records and obscure online forums for hours. "Danny, come look at this." Her screen showed an old court filing from a small county north of Dallas, dated about 7 years prior. The defendant, Leonard Matheson. The charge, aggravated indecent liberties with a minor. My blood ran cold. The case details were sparse. It had been sealed and eventually dismissed. Lack of conclusive evidence, the brief summary stated. The complainant, a 16-year-old girl, had apparently recanted parts of her testimony under pressure. Leonard Matheson, Leo M. He was 68 years old. The photo attached to an old community volunteer profile April unearthed showed a younger version of the man in Lily's selfie, the man I'd seen at the cabin. The same kind eyes, the same predatory chill lurking beneath. But it was the next piece of information that made me physically recoil. April had cross-referenced Matheson's known associates from old university alumni networks. "Daniel," she said, her voice unusually gentle. "This Leonard Matheson, he attended UT Austin back in the day. Same years as Claire. Claire, my ex-wife, Lily's mother." The connection slammed into me like a freight train. A coincidence? It felt too specific, too malevolent. The true extent of the nightmare, however, was yet to unfold. The weight of Claire's potential connection to this monster was suffocating. I had to know. Despite our acrimonious divorce, despite the years of bitterness, I still had her number. My hand trembled as I dialed. She answered on the third ring, her voice cool, distant. "Daniel? What do you want?" "Claire," I started, my voice raw. "Do you know a man named Leonard Matheson? Goes by Leo?" There was a pause. A beat too long. "Leo?" "Yes, vaguely. Old college acquaintance, I think." "Why?" Her attempt at nonchalance was paper thin. "He's been involved with Lily," I said, the words tasting like ash. Another pause, longer this time. Then, the words that would forever be seared into my memory, delivered with a chilling calmness that bespoke a betrayal so profound it buckled my knees. "Oh, Leo. Yes. I introduced him to Lily, actually. She needed a mentor, Daniel. Someone to talk to. After the divorce, with you being so emotionally unavailable, I thought she needed a stable older male figure in her life. Someone who could understand a teenage girl's feelings. Leo was always so good with young people, so wise." I couldn't breathe. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the floor. My ex-wife, the mother of my child, had introduced her to this predator. Justified it. Because I wasn't emotionally available. The room spun. The carefully constructed walls I'd built around my sanity, my ability to function, crumbled into dust. This wasn't just a stranger preying on my daughter. This was a betrayal from within. From the one other person on this earth who should have protected Lily above all else. The shock was a physical blow, leaving me gasping, drowning in a sea of unimaginable pain and fury. It wasn't just Leo the first had to fight. It was the ghost of my failed marriage, the venom of my ex-wife, all conspiring to destroy my child. The revelation of Claire's involvement, her casual, almost proud admission of introducing Lily to Leonard Matheson, aka Leo, nearly broke me. For days, I walked around in a daze, functioning on autopilot while April continued her relentless work. The knowledge that Lily's own mother had, whether through malice or an almost criminal level of naivete, facilitated this horror was a wound far deeper than anything Leo alone could have inflicted. But Leo Matheson, as we were rapidly learning, was not one to be deterred. Being let go from SafeMind hadn't stopped him. It had merely forced him to adapt. April, through some deep web sleuthing and tracking his online footprint, discovered his new venture. He'd established a private counseling and mentorship service. No official licenses, no oversight, no mandatory reporting. He called it Path to Light. The name itself felt like a cruel mockery. His target audience was clearly parents, concerned, perhaps overwhelmed parents, looking for guidance for their troubled or introverted teens. He had a slick, if amateurish, website filled with platitudes about understanding the unique challenges of adolescence, fostering self-esteem and unlocking potential. It was all couched in therapeutic-sounding jargon designed to inspire trust and confidence. We have to see how he operates this, Danny, April said. Her eyes narrowed in determination. We need to know how he's luring them in now. So I became a potential client. Using a burner email address and a fabricated persona, a worried single father named Mark Johnson. With a supposedly withdrawn 15-year-old daughter, I sent an inquiry to the contact address Lee Stead on the Path to Light website. The response was astoundingly fast. Within 15 minutes, an email from Leo M., youth empowerment coach, landed in my fake inbox. It was warm, empathetic, and deeply concerning. Dear Mark, it began. Thank you for reaching out. It takes courage to seek support, and I commend you for prioritizing your daughter's well-being. So many young people today feel misunderstood and adrift. My approach at Path to Light is to create a safe, confidential space where they can truly be themselves, explore their feelings, and discover their inner strength. He went on for several paragraphs, a masterclass in manipulative grooming language. He emphasized his unique ability to connect with teens, his years of informal experience, and the profound transformations he'd witnessed. Attached to the email was a PDF brochure, Path to Light, Guiding Young Hearts. It was filled with stock photos of smiling teenagers, interspersed with glowing, anonymous testimonials. And then my blood froze. Page 3. Under a section titled Success Stories, Empowered Teens on Their Journey, there was a collage of photos, small, slightly grainy images of young people, presumably his former or current men's. And there she was, Lily, her face smiling tentatively. It was a photo I didn't recognize, but it was unmistakably her. Her image had been cleverly cropped and incorporated into the collage, presented as a testament to his program's effectiveness, a silent endorsement. My daughter, my beautiful, vulnerable daughter, was being used as bait to lure other unsuspecting children, other desperate parents, into his predatory web. The audacity of it, the sheer, unmitigated gall of this man, sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. He wasn't just continuing his abuse. He was weaponizing his victims to perpetuate it. This wasn't just about saving Lily anymore, it was about dismantling his entire insidious operation. The PDF felt like a ticking bomb in my hands. The sight of Lily's face in that grotesque Path to Light brochure used as a lure was the final straw. The time for covert surveillance and quiet investigation was over. It was time to bring the full weight of the law down on Leonard Matheson. April and I spent a frantic, caffeine-fueled night compiling everything we had, the iPad messages, the printouts from Lily's coded notebook, the logs of Leo's movements, the high-definition video footage from the cabin showing multiple underage girls, the information about his previous sealed accusation, the Path to Light brochure, and my email exchange with him under my fake persona. We created multiple encrypted digital copies and several hard copy binders. It was a horrifying, damning dossier. The next morning, I contacted a reputable lawyer specializing in child protection cases, a name April had fiercely vetted. Simultaneously, April used her press credentials and contacts to get a direct line to a senior agent at the FBI's Austin field office, bypassing some of the initial bureaucratic hurdles we might have otherwise faced. The meeting with Special Agent Davies at the FBI office was surreal. I laid out the story, my voice trembling at times, April interjecting with crisp, factual details. We presented the evidence. Agent Davies listened intently, his expression growing grimmer with each piece of information, each video clip we showed him. He asked pointed, professional questions, but there was a human anger in his eyes that mirrored my own. Mr. Harris, he said when we were done, what you and your friend have compiled here is extensive and deeply disturbing. We will take this with the utmost seriousness. The next 4 days were an agony of waiting. The FBI, working in conjunction with the Texas Rangers and local sheriff's department for the county where the cabin was located, launched their own swift, intensive investigation to corroborate our findings and build an airtight case for a search warrant. They conducted their own surveillance, interviewed other potential sources, and legally tracked Matheson's communications. Then the call came. Agent Davies, Mr. Harris, we're executing the search warrant on the cabin and Mr. Matheson's residence this afternoon. We have a strong team in place. I wanted to be there to see it happen, but I knew it was impossible, improper. Instead, I sat by the phone, April pacing my living room like a caged tiger, both of us jumping at every sound. Hours later, Agent Davies called again. His voice was grim but satisfied. We have Mr. Matheson in custody. The search of the cabin. Mr. Harris, it was worse than we imagined. We found multiple hard drives, dozens of memory cards, hidden recording devices, thousands of images and videos, explicit material involving numerous minors, including your daughter. We also found files detailing his Path to Light operation, correspondence with other parents. It's a significant haul. Relief, so potent it made me dizzy, washed over me, quickly followed by a wave of nausea at the confirmation of my worst fears. He was caught. The immediate threat was neutralized. They brought Matheson through Austin for processing before transferring him to the county jail where the cabin was located. Agent Davies had arranged for me to be at a secure location where I could see the transfer, a small concession to the hell I'd endured. as they led Matheson. Handcuffed and looking disheveled but strangely unrepentant from one vehicle to another, his eyes scanned the small, cordoned-off area. And then they found mine. He knew who I was. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. As he was being guided into the back of the police cruiser, he turned his head, his voice just loud enough for me to hear across the few yards separating us. A chilling, possessive taunt. "She'll come back to me, you know. Lily. She loves me. You're just temporary, Harris. You'll see." The car door slammed shut. But his words, his confident, evil smirk, lingered in the air like a poisonous vapor. He was caught, yes, but the battle for Lily's mind, for her soul, was far from over. His poison had sunk deep. Leonard Matheson was behind bars, but his shadow loomed large over our lives, especially Lily's. The immediate aftermath of his arrest was a maelstrom of police interviews, victim support services, and the dawning, horrific realization for Lily of what had truly happened to her. The news, when it finally broke and she understood that Leo, her confidant, her special friend, was a predator arrested for crimes against her and other children, shattered the fragile remnants of her adolescent world. She retreated into a shell so deep I feared I'd never reach her. She barely ate, existing on sips of water and the occasional piece of toast I'd leave by her door. Sleep was a battlefield. Nightmares jerked her awake, screaming or crying silently into her pillow. During the day, she'd sit by her window, staring out with vacant eyes, or lie curled up on her bed, a tiny, broken figure. The self-blame was a corrosive acid eating away at her. "It's my fault, Dad," she'd whisper during rare moments when she'd let me sit with her, her voice hoarse from disuse or crying. "I should have known. I was stupid. I trusted him." Each word was a fresh stab to my own already bleeding heart. I tried to reassure her, to tell her it wasn't her fault, that Matheson was a master manipulator, a monster who preyed on kindness and vulnerability. But my words felt hollow, unable to penetrate the thick wall of her guilt and shame. Agent Davies connected us with victim services, and they recommended a child psychologist specializing in trauma and grooming cases, Dr. Evelyn Monroe. She was based downtown, a calm, empathetic woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and a reputation for working miracles with young survivors. Getting Lily to agree to see Dr. Monroe was an ordeal. "I don't want to talk about it," she'd insist, her voice flat. "It won't change anything." But I persisted gently, relentlessly. "Just one session, sweetie. For me. If you hate it, we don't have to go back." Reluctantly, she agreed. The first few sessions were largely silent. Lily would sit hunched in the chair, picking at her nails, offering monosyllabic answers to Dr. Monroe's gentle questions. I'd wait in the reception area, my own anxiety a tight knot in my stomach, praying for a breakthrough. Dr. Monroe was patient. She didn't push. She created a space where Lily could simply be, without expectation. And slowly, painstakingly, Lily began to unfurl. It started with small things, a shared observation about a painting in the office, a brief comment about a song she'd heard. Then, one late evening, after a particularly draining therapy session for her, Lily was sitting on the edge of her bed, and I was perched awkwardly on her desk chair. The room was dimly lit, the silence stretching between us. She turned to me, her eyes shadowed, filled with a pain so profound it stole my breath. "Dad," she began, her voice a mere whisper, fragile as glass. If I tell you everything? All of it? The things he said, the things he made me think. Will you still love me?" The question, raw and steeped in her deepest fear of rejection and disgust, shattered what little composure I had left. I crossed the room in 2 strides, knelt beside her bed, and gathered her trembling frame into my arms. "Oh, Lily Bug," I choked out, my own tears finally breaking free, hot and heavy. I held her tight, rocking her gently as sobs racked her small body. "You are the most precious thing in my entire world. Nothing, and no one can ever change that. I will always love you. Always." We stayed like that for a long time. 2 broken souls clinging to each other in the wreckage of our lives, the unspoken horrors finally, tentatively beginning to find their way into the light. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. A fragile, precious start. Lily's whispered question and my tearful reassurance marked a turning point, however small. The path to recovery was arduous, a slow, painful climb out of a very dark place, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that we might actually make it. One of the first practical steps was changing schools. The thought of Lily returning to her old high school, facing the inevitable whispers, the pitying or curious glances, was unbearable for both of us. Dr. Monroe supported the decision, emphasizing the need for a fresh start, a safe environment where Lily wouldn't feel defined by Matheson's crimes. We found a smaller charter school across town, one known for its supportive atmosphere and strong arts program, which I hoped might reignite Lily's dormant passion for sketching. The first day I drove her to the new school. She was pale and trembling, but she straightened her shoulders and walked through those doors. It was an act of immense courage. Dr. Monroe encouraged Lily to keep a journal, not just of events, but of her feelings, her nightmares, her moments of panic, and any tiny victories. It became her therapeutic lifeline, a place where she could pour out the confusion and pain without judgment. Sometimes she'd let me read passages, raw, unfiltered accounts of Matheson's insidious grooming. How he'd made her feel special, chosen, understood in a way no one else did. How he'd slowly isolated her, turning her against me, convincing her that their secret world was a haven. Reading those entries was like swallowing shards of glass, but it helped me understand the depth of his manipulation, the subtle ways he'd poisoned her mind. A few months into Lily's individual therapy, Dr. Monroe suggested joint sessions for us. "Daniel," she'd said gently, "Lily needs to process her anger, her feelings of betrayal, not just towards Matheson, but potentially towards the world, towards the adults who were supposed to protect her, including you. It won't be easy, but it's a necessary step." She wasn't wrong. Those sessions were brutal. Lily, emboldened by the safe space Dr. Monroe created, finally unleashed the torrent of her pain. She cried. She raged. She screamed at me for not seeing the signs sooner, for not protecting her. "Where were you, Dad?" she'd yelled, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you know?" Each accusation was a fresh wound, but I knew I had to absorb it, to validate her feelings without defensiveness. I apologized over and over, for my blindness, for my failings, for not being the shield she deserved. I let her see my own guilt, my own profound regret. And slowly, after the storms of anger, came a fragile calm. Through those painful confrontations, facilitated by Dr. Monroe's skilled guidance, Lily began to internalize a crucial truth. It wasn't her fault. She was a child. He was an adult, a predator who had expertly exploited her innocence, her kindness, her normal adolescent need for validation and connection. There were still bad days, days when the shadows would creep back in, when a careless word or a news report about a similar case would trigger a spiral of anxiety. But the good days started to outnumber the bad. I'd hear her laugh again, a genuine, unforced laugh, usually at something silly on TV or a comment from a new friend at school. I saw her pick up her sketchbook again, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Each small step forward was a victory, hard one. We were learning to breathe again together. Nearly a year after Leonard Matheson's arrest, the case finally went to trial. The intervening months had been filled with legal wrangling, pre-trial motions, and the agonizing process of preparing Lily to potentially testify. Matheson, despite the mountain of evidence against him, had pleaded not guilty. He'd hired a notoriously aggressive, high-priced defense attorney from Houston, one known for tearing victims apart on the stand and muddying the waters with character assassination and victim blaming. His defense strategy became sickeningly clear during the opening statements. This wasn't a case of predatory grooming and child abuse, they argued, but a series of misunderstood relationships. Consensual interactions with troubled but mature young women who were now being manipulated by overzealous prosecutors and hysterical parents. They tried to paint Matheson as a benevolent, if unorthodox, mentor, a victim himself of a modern-day witch hunt. The courtroom was packed every day. Media from across the state, child advocacy groups, and a grimly curious public. April was there, of course, covering it for her paper, but more importantly, as a steadfast pillar of support for me. My ex-wife, Claire, was subpoenaed by the prosecution. Her testimony was a pathetic spectacle of self-preservation and feigned ignorance, claiming Matheson had duped her too. No one, least of all the jury, seemed to buy it. Then came the day Lily had to testify. She was 16 by then, but looked so much younger, so fragile, walking towards the witness stand. I sat in the front row, my hands clenched, my heart aching with a mixture of pride and terror for her. Dr. Monroe was there too, a calm presence in the chaotic courtroom. Lily took the stand, her voice barely a whisper as she swore to tell the truth. But as the prosecutor, Miss Evans, a sharp, compassionate woman who had spent hours with Lily, began her gentle questioning. A quiet strength seemed to settle over my daughter. She recounted her initial meetings with Matheson, the way he'd made her feel special, the secrets they shared, the gradual escalation of his control. Matheson's lawyer was brutal on cross-examination, just as we'd feared. He twisted her words, questioned her memory, insinuated she was an unreliable narrator, even a willing participant. He brought up her past arguments with me, trying to paint her as a rebellious teen seeking attention. Through it all, Lily, though visibly trembling at times, held her ground. She looked directly at the jury, her voice gaining clarity and conviction. The most powerful moment came when Ms. Evans, on redirect, asked her a simple question. "Lily, do you remember the very first thing Mr. Matheson said to you that made you feel like he truly understood you, that he was different?" Lily nodded, her eyes glistening but resolute. She looked not at Matheson but directly at the jury, her voice clear and carrying through the suddenly silent courtroom. He told me I was the only one in the whole world who truly understood him, that everyone else was too shallow, but I was special. He said he needed me." A collective intake of breath seemed to ripple through the courtroom. In that one statement, Lily had perfectly encapsulated the insidious, manipulative core of grooming, the way predators flip the script, making the child feel powerful, needed, responsible for the adult's emotional well-being. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. The verdict, guilty, on all counts. Luring a minor, continuous sexual abuse of a child, possession and distribution of child sexual abuse material. And a newer, more comprehensive charge related to systematic psychological grooming. Leonard Matheson, 68 years old, stood impassive as the judge read the sentence, 18 years in state prison, with strict parole conditions if he ever got out and lifetime registration as a sex offender. It wasn't life, but it was significant. He would be an old, broken man if he ever saw the outside of a prison cell again. As they led him away, his eyes, for a fleeting moment, met mine. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a look of hollow defeat. It wasn't triumph I felt, but a profound, weary relief. Justice, in its slow, imperfect way, had been served. But the scars Matheson had inflicted would remain, a testament to his evil, and to Lily's incredible courage. The trial was over, Matheson was locked away, but for Lily, the journey was far from finished. The public nature of the proceedings, the reliving of her trauma on the witness stand, had been both excruciating and, in a strange way, empowering. She had spoken her truth and she had been believed. A few weeks after the sentencing, Lily came to me with a new resolve shining in her eyes. She'd been talking extensively with Dr. Monroe about how to channel her experiences into something positive. Something that could help others who had walked or were still walking in similar shadowed paths. Dad, she said, her voice quiet but firm, I want to write a letter. Not just for me, but for the other girls. The ones from the cabin, the ones who might still be out there, caught in someone else's web. Dr. Monroe said she knows a network, a support center that can distribute it anonymously if I want. Over the next few days, Lily poured her heart onto paper. She wrote and rewrote, crossed out words, filled margins with thoughts. When she finally showed me the finished letter, my hands trembled as I read it. It was a masterpiece of raw honesty, pain, and burgeoning strength. To anyone who feels lost, scared, or confused by someone who says they love you but makes you feel small or secret, it began. My name is Lily, and for a long time I was one of you. I met a man who I thought was my friend, my confidant. He made me feel special, like I was the only one who understood him. He told me our connection was unique, a love that others wouldn't understand. He made me believe that the secrets we kept were precious, a sign of our bond. She went on to describe, without graphic detail but with searing emotional clarity, the insidious process of grooming, the way Matheson had isolated her, manipulated her trust, and systematically stolen pieces of her childhood, her innocence. She wrote about the confusion, the shame, the crushing weight of self-blame she had carried for so long. He made me think it was my fault, she wrote, that I was mature, that I wanted this, that I was somehow responsible for his happiness, for his loneliness. For a long time, I believed him. I believed that I was dirty, that I was to blame for the darkness he brought into my life. But then the letter took a turn, a beacon of hope emerging from the pain. But now I know the truth, Lily continued, her words infused with a newfound power. The truth is, we were never to blame. We were children. We were targeted because we were kind, because we were trusting, because we had good hearts that a monster decided to exploit. He didn't love us, he used us. What he called love was control. What he called a special bond was manipulation. She wrote about her journey through therapy, the difficult process of confronting her trauma, and the slow, painful steps towards self-forgiveness. Healing is not a straight line, she acknowledged. There are still bad days, but I'm learning to forgive myself. Not for what he did, because that was never my burden to carry, but for believing his lies for so long. Forgive yourself for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. Forgive yourself for being a child. The letter ended with a powerful call to action, a message of solidarity. You are not alone. We are not weak because this happened to us. We were preyed upon because we possessed qualities like empathy and trust, qualities they twisted. But now it's time to reclaim our voices, our stories, our power. Speak your truth. Even if your voice shakes, seek help. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to heal. I finished reading, tears streaming down my face, a lump so tight in my throat I could barely breathe. My daughter, my brave, resilient, incredible 16-year-old daughter. She had faced the abyss and was not only climbing out but was determined to throw a rope down for others still lost in the darkness. In that moment, the pride I felt for her was boundless, a fierce, protective wave that washed away some of the lingering shadows of the past year. She wasn't just surviving, she was becoming a warrior. Life after the trial began to find a new, tentative rhythm. The storm had passed, leaving wreckage in its wake, but also clearing the ground for new growth. Lily continued her therapy with Dr. Monroe, and our joint sessions, though still challenging, became less about raw pain and more about rebuilding, understanding, and strengthening our bond. She excelled at her new school, made a small circle of close, genuine friends, and her laughter, once so rare, became a more frequent sound in our home. One Sunday afternoon, about 6 months after Matheson's sentencing, I was in the kitchen, attempting my semi-famous, at least in our household of two chili, when Lily came up beside me. She'd been quiet and thoughtful all day, sketching in her room. "Dad?" she said, nudging my arm. "Yeah, sweetie," I replied, stirring the pot. "I have an idea," she said, a spark of excitement in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long, long time. "Remember my letter? And how Dr. Monroe said it helped some other kids?" I nodded, turning down the heat. "Well," she continued, twisting a strand of her hair. "A nervous habit she'd mostly outgrown, but that still surfaced when she was truly passionate about something. I want to do more. I want to make a podcast. For kids like me. For anyone who's been through stuff. Like a voice journal, you know? Sharing stories, maybe talking to other survivors eventually, or therapists like Dr. Monroe. A way to let people know they're not alone, that there's hope." I put the spoon down, turned, and really looked at her. Her eyes were bright, her expression earnest. The tentative girl was receding, replaced by a young woman of purpose. A slow smile spread across my face. "Lily, that's a fantastic idea. My own background in software, my familiarity with audio editing from old college radio days, suddenly felt like it had a new purpose. I can help you with the sound, the editing. We can set up a little recording space in your room." Her face lit up. "Really, Dad? You'd help me? Are you kidding? I'd be honored." And so, Lily's Lantern was born. We spent a few weeks planning, outlining initial episodes, and setting up basic recording equipment. Her first episode was simply her reading her letter, her voice clear and steady, followed by some reflections on her journey since writing it. We released it quietly, just sharing the link with Dr. Monroe and a few online support groups. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 3 weeks, that first episode had nearly 2,000 listens. Messages began to pour in, emails, comments on the podcast platform, from other young people, some sharing their own stories of survival, others simply saying, "Thank you for making me feel seen." Parents wrote in too, expressing gratitude for the resource, for the voice of hope Lily was providing. One evening, Lily was reading through some of the comments, a soft smile on her face. She looked up at me, her eyes shining. "Dad," she said, her voice filled with a quiet wonder. "I'm not scared anymore, not really, and I know I'm not alone." I smiled back, my heart full. In that moment, watching my daughter connect with and uplift others, I realized we hadn't just survived the nightmare Matheson had plunged us into. We were doing more than that. We were actively rewriting our story, turning a chapter of profound darkness into a new beginning, a narrative of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of a father's love and a daughter's courage. We were lighting lanterns for ourselves and for others still finding their way out of the dark. "Thanks, Dad," Lily said softly one night as we were winding down, the comforting ordinariness of a weekday evening settling around us. For not leaving me behind. Even when I pushed you away so hard." I pulled her into a hug, resting my chin on the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, a simple, grounding anchor. "You're my daughter, Lilybug," I whispered back, my voice thick with emotion. "And I will never, ever stop fighting for you."